Hello and welcome to the Tachiai Aki Banzuke podcast. We are back. We are better than ever. And I'm Bruce, associate editor of Tachiai. With me is the creator of Tachiai, Andy. Say hello.
Hey, Bruce. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. And also with us, the man who is usually in foreign lands but is now writing out the pandemic in the United States. Hello, Josh.
Trapped like a Shikihira Bear Rikishi in my apartment. Hello, everybody.
Well played, old boy. So, thank you very much to the rest of Team Tachiai for taking over responsibilities on the blog in July. I was mostly out of commission thanks to my work dealing with, shall we say, medical testing stuff and associated bits. So, I'd like to dive right into probably what is one of the strangest Banzukes to come out in a while. And I'm not talking about the third Sekiwake slot. If you can stump LK Sumo and get him to mutter and go, I give up, that is some impressive drinking while making a Banzuke. So, I don't know, initial reactions. Andy, what do you think?
I think that there were definitely some questionable promotions there, and then some rather weird demotions. I think that Terano Fuji, we all love the fact that he's back, but I was kind of hoping that this was a little bit too early to be in the joy, and
he's the top of the rank and file, man.
Dog in there, and I know that Toko Shoryu, he bounced all the way up to Maegashira 2, but
yeah.
He had a 14-1 record with his Yusho, and so. There's not a lot of precedent there to really look at, but I did see that. In the last tournament, you got Terutsuyoshi was also 12-3.
Yep.
He went from Maegashira 16 to Maegashira 9.
Yep.
So it's yes, Terano Fuji, that Yusho definitely gave him a bit more than what he. Than what is probably needed. But the thing is, we're pretty weak up there at the top anyway. So he might be able to. I'm hoping that he'll be able to stick it out and really, really have a great tournament. But Ichinojo up into the Maegashira, up into the Makuuchi, that was a bit of a surprise.
Yep.
It seemed from where he was. Juryo 1-3 would have been more in that range. Takayasu, last year Kagayaki actually went from Maegashira 13 to Maegashira 11 rather than all the way up to 6, and so there were definitely some people who had quite a bit of Banzuke luck. And then like Ikiyoi and Abi getting the other end of the stick. So it was definitely a very, very weird one.
Yep. Josh, thoughts on the Banzuke? I'm sure that some of the entries had you sort of going, wow, look at that.
Yeah, probably the demotions more than anything. I mean, you look at Onosho and Abi and their contrasting fortunes and the reason for those fortunes. Obviously, Onosho couldn't buy a win.
Yep.
In the first, 13 days of the tournament last time, 2-13 ends up down. Maegashira 9, I think a lot of us would have expected him to fall a lot further than that. Abi, I think, fell quite a bit further than you would have expected given his record. But his problem was he couldn't buy a drink because people were buying them for him in a place where he shouldn't have been. So, and I think the real issue there with his strict emotion and, whatever the conversation was behind the scenes when they put the Banzuke together, I think would be really interesting. But with Abi taking a 3-tournament suspension, obviously each successive tournament from now will be an 0-13, and that's really going to dictate where he restarts his sumo career.
Yeah.
So him getting that first demotion a little bit more intense than we might have expected. Maybe we would expect to see him Maegashira 11, Maegashira 12. That will have knock-on effects down the line, I think, for sure.
So I've got to point to Yutaka Yama. All right, he's 5-10 in July, and he drops from Majashira 1, only down to Majashira 4. Um, I don't know if I'd call that Banzuke luck or some kind of inflation of of scores, but that was crazy to me. That was absolutely crazy. Yes, I am a Yutakayama fan, and I think that he is generally better than that 5-10, but he should have been thumped. I mean, just to keep it fair. But yeah, okay. So let's talk about the structure of how this tournament's going to go, and we'll get into what's going on with Hakuho in a little bit. But we've got two Ozeki now. At least one of them's pretty strong, and I mean he finished the July tournament with a respectable score, right? So he finished the Jun Yusho at 12-3. But he was kicking himself that he didn't take the Yusho away from the Kaiju. But, Ichinojo was on a tear. But I think that, he's really driving himself. He's feeling like he needs to push himself towards getting a few more Yusho. Josh, what do you think about Asanoyama? Can he keep his head in the game and not get too stressed out?
Yeah, I think it was actually a really great tournament for him. First tournament as an Ozeki. He stepped up. He had a great unbeaten run at the start of the tournament. I think the difference between him and the situation with Takakeisho now is Takakeisho's had a lot of injury problems since he became an Ozeki and doesn't necessarily have the same weight of expectation, whereas Asanoyama's, come straight out and said, the next step for me is to move up the Banzuke again and become a Yokozuna. And it's very clear that is the intention for him. Takakeisho would obviously say the same thing, but I think realistically the two of them are in very different circumstances right now. I think, especially if we look at this and say, it's unlikely that we're going to see certainly both of the Yokozuna, but possibly even one of the Yokozuna in the next tournament or even tournaments, plural. You would expect him as the top man on the Banzuke to be the one who is stepping up and, putting himself in the frame to be the favorite, which if you want to be the Yokozuna, that's what you have to do.
Yep, for fans who are wondering, the normal guidelines, I don't think it's scribed in stone, but, two back-to-back Yusho will do it for the Yokozuna. But the fact that we've seen some really consistent, excellent performance out of Asanoyama, and the fact that we're probably going to lose one or two Yokozuna within the next 12 calendar months may cause a bit of a consideration, which frankly I think would be very worrisome because too rapid promotion can lead to problems. But let me ask you this. I mean, the next slot down the Banzuke is, of course, at Sekiwaki, Andy. And they've opened up a third slot for Daisho, who absolutely blew the doors off in July. And he was just looking fantastic. I mean, the man's had some really good sumo over the past 12 months. And now I think I would say that he's sort of pressing to overtake. But you've got Mataki Yumi up there who looks born again hard. Right? Yeah. I mean, a lot of times he seems to kind of fade in the second week or phone it in, but he looked born again hard in July. And God help me, Shodai actually looking like he wants to do sumo. I think the tutelage under Kakuryu has done him a huge amount of good. But tell me what you think about Daisho in that third Sekiwaki slot, Andy.
Well, I think that he was another one who got pretty lucky. He had that great bout against Hakuho, but he did have two Fusen victories. And so he did get a bit of Banzuke luck when his stablemate Endo showed up Kakuryu on day one. Daisho slipped into a Fusen show. So I think that right there you've got a very, very interesting rivalry there within the stable. And you mentioned Shodai. You talked a little bit before about Yutakayama, and I think that both of them, they're not necessarily at parity, Shodai and Yutakayama, but I think that they definitely are able to, with this Daigeko ban and this whole situation, they're able to kind of compete and improve each other. Whereas over there at Oitekaze stable, you've got a much more, I guess, two guys that really are about the same
Yep.
uh,
Strength.
quality.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Endo and Daisho, and they're really kind of it's a nice rivalry to see for who's going to be Heigashira, the top guy in the stable, and it's going back and forth between them. Endo had it for most of the time up until last year, and now Daisho seems to have kind of turned the tables and been able to pick it up, and so I think that we'll be able to see. A very interesting tournament out of both of them, especially since the we've got such weakness in the top ranks.
Well,
Um,
just really the Yokozuna ranks right now.
and will and I'm hopeful that that Asanoyama will really be able to kind of take advantage and um, be the Ozeki that we've really needed for a couple of years now. But I do think that Endo and Daisho will be able to, I guess, take advantage of their position and have a good tournament.
So let's go to. I mean, sports fans always love a Cinderella story, and what kind of Cinderella story could be better than an Ozeki who gets busted in rank? He's got overwhelming health problems. He drops down the Banzuke to the second division and brawls his way back up, powering through Juryo. His first sort of lucky berth back in the top division at the rump end of the Banzuke, and he destroys all comers, takes home the cup. I'm talking, of course, about our favorite kaiju Terano Fuji. But those knees, Josh, those knees worry me. His fighting spirit seems to be as fierce as ever, but I don't know if his body can take the top rank and file position. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, it's the story is the incredible thing. I had obviously written him off. People I talked to in Japan said he should just retire. He said he should just retire. But credit to him and his Oyakata for working to get him back into some kind of condition over time. When he did come back in the fifth division, fourth division, and Sandan Main Junidan, we're going, oh, he looks just like drunk and hungover, but he's just battering these guys who are, obviously a much weaker condition, much weaker sumo ability than him. But he worked his way through a really, difficult set of divisions, closer to the top, and comes back with this very unexpected Yusho. I think he's right to say that he aims for Kachikoshi here. I think that would be a great result. Obviously, as you mentioned, stamina is his key issue. But, the fact that people are even saying, and we see comments on the site, can he be the Ozeki again? I think, that kind of statement to me, in context with what Andy was just saying, that's a real kick in the pants for someone like Mitakeumi, who's been at the top and spurned so many chances, while Terano Fuji has fought his way back up from the fifth division to get an opportunity to fight the best guys in sumo again. And it brings it into relief because, you look at it, as you mentioned, the stamina is going to be a key here because look at all those guys, Yokozuna accepted, who are around him.
Yes.
When you go back and you look at, when Terano Fuji was down in the fifth division and you had Mitakeumi consistently at Sekiwake, who was there with him? It was like a bunch of guys who were never going to threaten for Ozeki. You had Tamawashi, you had like Myogiru, and, it's like Aoyama would pop up there. Now, look at this collection of guys who's in there around Terano Fuji, and it's like, as Andy mentioned, you got Daisho doing great sumo. Shodai looks like he's the real deal. Mitakeumi's come back. Endo at his highest rank.
So even the other Majashira 1, Takanosho, looks like he's really picking up a lot of steam, and he's going to be headed places. I worry about how he's going to survive. Yeah, I mean,
it's what, but I think that's what he has to go through so that he and everybody else can understand what his ceiling really is now, because he's obviously too good to be a Maegashira 17.
But I would be remiss if I didn't state that yet again we had someone come from the bottom edge of the Banzuke from the lower third and take the cup, and yet another indicator of our transition period that we're in is that and I think Gunning or Murray Johnson said, at this point, anyone on the Banzuke could contest for the cup. It's not that it's just going to be the top people. All right, so I want to. Speaking of people who are new or lower down on the Banzuke, I'd like to talk about Tobizaru and Hoshoryu, both of which are making some fairly exciting top division debuts. For Tobizaru, yes, I sometimes refer to him as Flying Monkey because that is what his Shikona is. He is a flying monkey. He's been brawling around in Juryo for a while, and it's taken him a while to get to the point where his sumo is adequate for him to make a bid into the bottom end of the top division. But Andy, any comments on Tobizaru or Hoshoryu?
It will be interesting to see how long he can hang around, and with Hoshoryu as well. I'm hopeful. Well, right now their goal is clearly just getting that Kachikoshi.
Yep.
Will maybe even just getting a 7 and 8 would be able to keep them in, and they'll be able to, I don't know, get that experience. But they're up against some very, very hardened wrestlers, and if they have too good of a run at it, they're going to end up getting scheduled against guys who are up in the joy. And so I would definitely, I could see the new guys generally either surprising on the upside and then getting beat down again, or just coming in and really, I guess, being in over their heads. And Hoshoryu will be very interesting. He will definitely have a lot of, I guess, expectations on his shoulders from his uncle.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful that they will both get Kachikoshi, be able to hang around for a little while. But like you mentioned with Tobizaru, like he was hanging around the bottom of Juryo for a year, and
Yep.
it will not be a rapid rise like we're seeing with Terunofuji for either of these guys. They're going to need to either grind it out down there at the bottom or of the Banzuke, or they'll find themselves in Juryo again.
So Josh, I can really credit you for turning me on to watching specific individuals in the lower ranks. And so I'm really kind of interested in your take on Tobizaru and Hoshoryu.
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit to Tanny's point, there's different expectations for the two of these guys. You know, as you mentioned, Tobizaru is down there in Juryo for 3 years, and his brother, Hidenoumi, different stable. But I think, you know, what he really wants is for Hidenoumi to come back up to the top division, for them to, you know, be able to battle it out, obviously not with each other, but up there. But I think the key for him is just, you know, being able to establish himself right now as a top division Rikishi. Hoshoryu, obviously, the expectations are completely different. You know, this is someone from the time that he entered sumo, you know, the weight of expectation of the fact that his uncle Asashoryu is, you know, one of the greater yokozuna of our time. You know, obviously the comparisons are going to be made, and obviously, certainly on social media for those people who follow the yokozuna. There's a lot of commentary about the progress of Hoshoryu's career. You know, he's someone with an incredible amount of talent. He's obviously someone in tradition, I think, of a lot of Rikishi who come from Mongolia. You know, he has a lot of dimensions to sumo. He has a lot of technicality that I think a lot of people, you know, who enter sumo sort of traditionally through the Japanese system don't necessarily always have. And so it'll be intriguing to see how he takes the top division. You know, he's come out and said, I want double-digit wins and a special prize in my first tournament. And I think, you know, when you look at everybody who's around him, I think that's doable. He'll obviously get a couple matches with guys from Juryo. Some tough guy, you know, Meisei, Koto Shoho, you know, Kaisei, some difficult guys down there. But at the same time, listen, if he wants to be able to take the next step, you know, you got to be able to beat the Kyoko Taiseis and the Shimano Umis and at this stage of his career, Shohozan. So I think it's just exciting. And I think, you know, as we see people start to retire or fall out of the top division or disappear, go Kyujo for one reason or another, this really has been the year, I think, that we started to see that next generation of new Rikishi come up and establish themselves in the top division, and so for Hoshoryu, try and get those 10 wins, try and get the special prize. But, you're looking up at names that we used to see a year or two ago, down Juryo, Makushi, Terutsuyoshi, Wakataka Kage, these types of guys, they're all 10 ranks higher than him. And so that's where he's got to be looking.
So, yeah, you brought up the difference between Mongolian and Japanese athletes in this sport. At least for Hoshoryu, he's got more of a Haramafuji body type. Right, I don't necessarily see him gaining a lot of mass like a Matake Yumi has, right? And I think sumo has a lot of room for a lean, quick, powerful wrestler. So very exciting. But at the other end of the spectrum, on the day the Banzuke was announced, there was what appeared to be a solar eclipse, but no, what it was instead was Ichinojo claiming his place back at the rump end of the top division. The Mongolian behemoth, as NHK calls him, or the bridge abutment on the Saitama Bridge, as I tend to call him, or the latter half of the Shinkansen heading towards Hokkaido. I mean, either one. Large objects, don't want to get in its way. Andy, thoughts about Ichinojo returning to the top division?
I'm just back to see. I am very happy to see him back in prime time and not down in Juryo. I'm hopeful that he'll be able to stay up there for a while. He and Terunofuji are those guys that the chronic injuries obviously hurt Terunofuji and brought him down quite a bit further than Ichinojo. But Ichinojo's back has been definitely his issue. I'm hopeful that he will be able to, out kaiju the kaiju.
Oh.
And
don't try that. No, don't try that at home.
Well, the thing is, I don't see him being able to have those really, really competitive long bouts against like a Tochinoshin, those 4-minute just grueling epic bouts. We're not going to see them, and a lot of times we don't see a lot of fire from Ichinojo, and I think that those injuries are just things that they're there and they won't go away.
Josh, any comments on Ichinojo?
He's back with a little bit of a whimper. It's a similar situation, though. I mean, if you want to be positive to Tokushoryu when he came up in January off the back of a couple 8 and 7s, at the top of Juryo. So, look, he's got nothing to lose.
Are you saying Ichinojo Yusho?
No, I'm absolutely not. But he's maybe I will. No. Look, let's see what happens. The thing about Ichinojo, he's still only 27. He's been around for a long time, but he should be coming physically. I mean, he's physically kind of strange, but he should be coming into what could be his peak years. So, listen, again, Kachikoshi, great result. So hopefully he can do it.
Hopefully so. Okay, and with the rumor of Ichinojo Yusho firmly laid to rest, let's talk about news in the sumo world. You would think that with the pandemic raging around the world and with Japan more or less on some level of lockdown, there would be damn all happening in sumo. It would be all quiet days in the heiya, practicing as best you can and staying out of trouble. But no, that's not what happened at all. It's been a roller coaster ride. It appears that the boss Hakuho underwent knee surgery in August and is still not quite ready for prime time and will probably not make the September tournament. We're getting to the age where even the mighty Hakuho is looking increasingly vulnerable. Josh, do you have any comments you want to say about the fading of Hakuho?
No, it's not entirely unexpected. I mean, he had made comments earlier this year that this would probably be his last year. That was before the virus situation changed the nature of how we experience sumo. So, and obviously changed the scheduling of things like the Olympics, which in some way factored into Hakuho's plans for the sunset of his career. And that is still a little bit TBD. So, I think for most of us Hakuho fans, we just want to see him get fit and as fit as he can be and come back on the dohyo at some point. It's not going to happen this time. Then, don't rush it for November. We obviously don't know how things are going to unfold.
Yep.
With respect to the other things that are objectives for him, is all great athletes do. He finds objectives to set for himself, and some type of interaction with that Tokyo Olympic period was obviously something that was a goal for him, and I'm sure that will continue to be the case. But he doesn't have too much time left because his stable master turned 65 in less than a couple of years, I think, and
Yep.
I think most people expect that he will take over at that point, if not sooner. So,
Yep.
Clock's ticking.
I don't know, Andy. Thoughts? We're getting to the point where we may sunset a couple of Yokozuna soon.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think that it may be the other Yokozuna that's sunsets first, because the fact is, even with his injuries, Hakuho still has, of the last 4 cups, he holds 2 of them. And until somebody can actually beat him, not just a couple of times, but beat him consistently on the dohyo, he's going to be there, and he should be there. And he is a Yokozuna, and so he's got the privilege of being able to have surgery and I guess
Yep.
try to heal up. Kakuryu's got to feel a lot of pressure
Yeah.
now, and that I do not feel. I feel bad for Kakuryu, honestly. I feel like he has already had his own injury issues, and then that I'm sure that he felt a bit of embarrassment the way that he went out that last tournament, and
Yeah.
I don't think that that was particularly an embarrassing move. I know that Haruth has pointed out that like no Yokozuna has ever, I guess, lost on a on that Kimari, because it was a losing move and not a winning move from Endo. But that was, when I go back and look at that video, that was a master ploy by Endo. The way that he set his left foot and then he pulled it back up just as Kakuryu went in there for the swipe, the leg
For the
swipe.
sweep, yeah.
And so I do think that with both of them on edge, like with Kakuryu and with Hakuho, there's a real chance here for a change in leadership. We need to see it from our Ozeki, and I don't think it's going to be from T-Rex. And it will probably come from Asanoyama, although we've got a whole host of Sekiwaka in there that are going to be fighting for it too. And I think it will be an interesting basho to watch, and this time period will be one where we look back at like how well the greatest Yokozuna of our time ended his career, and so it will be kind of bittersweet to see both of these Yokozuna off, but we need to see some challengers come in and kind of try to take over. And one thing I did see real fire from Shodai in that last tournament. I mean, I learned a new Japanese word from my wife, guts pose. Like when Shodai beat Terunofuji, he was pumped, and I haven't seen that kind of energy from him like ever on the dohyo. And I would have almost expected him to get like a little stern scolding or something like that from the NSK for like pumping his fist like that. But I think everybody in the stadium kind of wanted to do it too. So
all 200 of them.
Yeah.
So let's pivot based on that sort of COVID note. Let's pivot to the workup for the Aki Basho. The Sumo Kyokai continues to ban Degeko, which is joint training between stables, which is specifically very important for higher ranking Rikishi. Many stables will only have a single Sekitori, and they will lack having anyone of sufficient skill, rank, size, musculature, or even fighting spirit to really hone their skills against prior to the start of the tournament. we had postulated before this little this little podcast recording that there could be like a sort of speakeasy environment where the Sekitori all sort of happen to congregate in the same parking lot somewhere in Ryogoku at the same time of day. They suddenly shed their yukata and they are in there just, throwing each other around on the asphalt, pavement rash be damned. But joking aside, Degeko is very important for bringing the top ranks into fighting tone. Josh, thoughts about how this is going to affect the tournament?
Yeah, so for folks who don't know, it's an opportunity for Rikishi to go visit another stable, generally in their own Ichiman, their own sort of family of stables, to go and do morning practice against other Rikishi of their own ability level, which, as you mentioned, kind of gets them tuned up for the tournament. It's interesting. If you look at the Banzuke this time, there's some interesting situations there, because you mentioned earlier, Daisho and Endo from the same stable, similar place in the Banzuke. They've obviously benefited from being able to practice with each other, as these guys can only practice with folks who are in their own stable. But you look a little deeper there, and you'll see Okunoumi and Hokuto Fuji just a couple ranks apart. You've got Terano Fuji and Terutsuyoshi from the same stable, just a couple ranks apart. There's a couple other examples of it as well, and I think that these guys in those particular stables have obviously benefited from the fact that they have training partners of a similar level that have been able to keep them at or elevate them. Takanosho, as you mentioned earlier, in the same stable as Takakeisho, and I think there's no coincidence there that Takanosho's development has benefited from the rise of Takakeisho. But for the Yokozuna, for some of these other guys, they don't have suitable training partners because of this situation with the Degeko ban owing to the coronavirus situation. Personally, I don't mind a Yokozuna tournament because of this. I think despite the last few years of withdrawals, you expect certain levels of a Yokozuna. You have to allow them the training opportunities that they need to reach those levels. That doesn't exist right now, so I'm not going to get broken up about it. But it's clearly a benefit to the guys in the deeper stables. And, I wrongly thought, we'll get to our regrettable predictions later, but before the last tournament, I thought Kakuyu would get the benefit of having Kirabayama, who's kind of a Haruma Fuji wannabe, in his stable. But there's a big difference between being a wannabe and being Haruma Fuji. And obviously Kirabayama has a long way to go, and it doesn't benefit Kakuyu right now. So, as I said, I think that, those guys who are in the deeper stables, the Daishos and Endos, hopefully we will continue to see consistency from them. That may be a reason why we continue to see Okunoumi at Sanyaku level. And I think, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Terano Fuji and the pressure that yet another, high-ranking Rikishi puts on the likes of a Matakayumi, who's just been hanging around in the Sekiwaki ranks for a long time, that continues to put pressure on him, because he's someone who would benefit from going on Degeko and practicing with Tochinoshin. So he doesn't have that opportunity. And so, those are the storylines that I think are sort of woven a little bit deeper here as you talk about the ability of certain folks. And, Shodai, who you were just mentioning a minute ago, again, he has to find it within himself now to reach those next levels. And hopefully he will continue to do that as he has the last couple tournaments.
So let's dive into one of the more scandalous pieces of sumo news of the recent several weeks. Abi, right? Abi's a very interesting, notable figure in the sumo world, and he's in a whole mess of trouble. As a matter of fact, folks here at Team Tachiai thought his sumo career was basically over. For folks who did not catch what had happened prior to and even during the tournament, it appears he went out at night to hostess clubs, drinking and carrying on with several other people in violation of the Sumo Kyokai rules. And as a result, he has been punished most severely. And they did not make him leave sumo, although from what I understand, he did submit a letter of resignation. They've decided to hold on to it and see how he behaves himself following on. So he's going to be sitting out for a while. His Oyakata has gotten a bit of a reprimand. And I'm really very curious what kind of condition Abi's going to come back in. Because he'd been putting on quite a bit of weight, I think possibly more mass than his sumo necessarily supported very well. Are we going to see a change in Abi, or is he just going to idiot himself out of a career? Andy, what are your thoughts?
I think it'll be very interesting to see him fighting back through that Makushita joy again. To see, we occasionally get a lot of our kind of our favorites, like Chiyoshoma and things, who fall out, and they end up in Makushita, and they hit that grinder, and like Jokoryu, they never really
can't break through,
come back.
Yeah.
Abi, he still has his health, and he will be able to, I think, come back pretty quickly. Just like Terunofuji, well, and probably quicker than Terunofuji, because I think that he won't be hindered. He'll hopefully be able to keep himself in shape,
Yep.
And he's going to be fighting against guys who are not quite ready for Abi sumo. The guys up in the he'd been hitting a wall there in the Sanyaku, and everybody, like in the Sanyaku or in the Joy, he'd never really kind of established himself because people were just really ready for his slaps and that Hataki Komi try. They knew his shtick. So one thing that I'm hopeful for is that he will be able to develop something new, and if he does, that could keep him that could get him past that wall in Sanyaku and keep him up there. But we'll see how seriously he takes it. I do know that, I mean, one thing that kind of seems to hit us foreigners a little bit more scandalous than it really needs to be is like the whole situation with the hostess clubs and stuff like that. When I moved over there, that was a whole new world to me, and it was like,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember talking to some of my like Japanese friends, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's how I funded my ski trip and things like that." Like it wasn't that.
It's not a big deal.
Right?
It's not a big deal.
And so there's a little bit, I think, too much of a little scandalous nature in that. It's just definitely during this time, it is an inappropriate place to go when you're trying to
avoid the plague.
Avoid the plague, exactly.
and not get the entire tournament shut down because you're suddenly coughing. All right, we're going to go to one last. Seeing as we're talking about that sort of region of the body and scandals as well, we're going to go to one more on this. And thank you to Harith, who covered it extensively, probably more extensively than it should have been covered in the blog. But some joker decided to steal somebody's mawashi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these mawashi are pieces of cloth, and they do not get washed, some of which have been worn for years and never been washed, and somebody stole one.
They had rabbit remains in it.
Oh, yes. The remains of somebody's pet rabbit were stuffed into the folds in the mawashi. Josh, can you explain?
No. I mean, I can't. I think anybody who's sort of familiar with some of the ludicrous storylines that often come out of like Japanese video games would be even pushed pretty far to sort of accept a stolen mawashi with rabbit remains in it as reality. I think it's crazy. I hope for the poor guy at Terasawa, I think his name was, that they find it and bring back his remains of his pet rabbit.
It's sad,
crossed.
But it's hilarious at the same time.
Yeah. It's like really weird. It's honestly like something out of like a Japanese crime-solving video game. So
I always remark, and please, I mean no offense to my Japanese friends, Japan is the land of WTF. It really is. And that's the only way that a barbarian like myself can describe it at times. All right, and so on that note, let us elevate and let us go into our always regrettable predictions. For those of you who are new to the Tachiai podcast, we make some whopper predictions, most of which are false and many of which we are embarrassed about by the middle weekend. So because Andy is well known for the person who tells the biggest whoppers, who reels in the ones that are just outrageous, but this year sometimes have been true, you're going to go first. Who do you think is going to do well this basho, and who do you think is going to take the cup?
I do think that Daisho and Endo are going to be able to play off each other, and that practice and have really, really good performances, but Asanoyama for the win.
Ooh.
Like I'm definitely thinking that we finally got some change in leadership, and I do see that this rivalry with Asanoyama, Mitakeyumi, Shodai, like and now Teruno Fuji coming up there. These guys are they're playing off of each other's fire, and it will be an exciting tournament to watch.
Okay.
And so I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to this. This tournament's going to be nuts, I think. All right, Josh, anything you'd like to regret in about 2 weeks?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm still regretting the fact that I picked Kakuryu for the U show last time, which obviously, is, as Andy detailed, day one didn't go too well for me. So I'd like to at least get to day two this time. I personally, I'm cheering for Asanoyama. I think the thing that, we were talking about earlier with the Yokozuna leaving and everything like that is it's like people at Maegashira 17 winning the tournament is not what's going to help us get to that next generation of Yokozuna. It's like someone who's an Ozeki, needs to win on a consistent basis, or someone who's now a Sekiwake, he needs to start to elevate them to get themselves in position. So I would like to see, someone, whether it's Asanoyama or one of the four guys immediately behind him, take this Yusho and really go on the start of a run here. I think you have to look at Asanoyama as the favorite. But look, any of the sort of 6, 7, 8 guys behind him equally, if they win, would be a great story for Sumo. And, Ichinojo winning would be like hilarious.
It would be hilarious.
But it would be a real problem.
It would also, yes, it'd be a real problem and hilarious.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I don't think one fish would be enough. Okay, so I'm going to predict that Hakuho will not start. Kakuryu will be out by day 10. And the rumors will swirl around his imminent retirement, his imminent intai, which will be too bad. I think that Shodai is going to do well, and I think that Mitakeyumi is going to contest for the Yusho right up until the end. But I think the cup is going to Takakeisho this time, and he is going to confound everyone who has their hopes on Asanoyama, who I think is going to feel the pressure, and he's going to choke. And I think that it's going to be the grand tadpole for the win. And with that, I'd like to say thanks to Josh, thanks to Andy for recording this podcast, and thanks to all of you for watching it. It's been a pleasure doing it, and remember, folks, for Sumo, it's Tachiai.